Let's go ahead and look at what we call the quadratic formula. I'm going to talk about the why we have it here in a minute. And so we're going to continue to solve quadratic equations, but we're going to learn a new formula. And if you have Mrs. Schroeder, she's going to sing it for you. And she'll probably have you sing it as well. And if you don't have Mrs. Schroeder, stop by and ask her to sing it for you. With that being said, let's go ahead and do a little review first. If we look at this problem out to the side, and I want to think about, to me it looks like, let's just take A times C and see what our factors are. 1 times 19. Well, we get the number 19. My factors are 1 and 19 and -1 and -19. Do any of those factors get me the B, which is 12? And the answer there is no. So we cannot solve this quadratic equation by finding our factors. Okay, we have to have a different way of solving. And so this is where the quadratic formula will be very helpful. So let's take this problem and let's go ahead and put it into our quadratic formula. Our quadratic formula is solving for our x values. Okay, it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all of that divided by 2a. Okay, what do we need to know by looking at this formula? We need to know what a, b, and c are. So we know that a is 1. We know that our b here is going to be a positive 12 and our c is going to be 19. So we're going to start by plugging those numbers in. So I'm just going to start with x equals, it says negative b. We're going to write the negative sign, and then whenever I substitute, I plug in parentheses. We're going to plug in 12. We're going to put plus minus. This is where we're going to get 2 answers. B, I'm going to put it in parentheses, is 12. We're going to square it. Minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 19. Close the parenthesis. All divided by 2 times a, which is 1. So everything that I substitute, I always like to put in parentheses. Now let's go ahead and start to simplify. I'll change colors here as we simplify. So when I simplify first, I see that this is just going to be a negative 12 plus or minus, and then 12 squared. We've got to do order of operations. It's going to be a 144. Take away, and then 4 times 1 times 19, which is going to give me a 76. That is all under my square root symbol, divided by 2. So you can see where I'm starting to simplify here. Next, I would do that 144 minus 76. And so we're going to have x equals a negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 68 divided by 2. So now we need to think, what is the square root of 68? If we type that into our calculator, we're going to get 8.25. So this is going to be 8.25. So I'm going to write this out. We're going to have 2 different answers. We're going to have x is equal to a negative 12 plus 8.25 divided by 2. And we're going to have x is equal to a negative 12 minus 8.25 divided by 2. Remember that we can have up to 2 possible answers where our quadratic, our parabola crosses at 2 places. So if I take negative 12 plus 8.25 and hit enter and divide that by 2, I get one of my answers as x equals a negative 1.875. Now you know why we couldn't just go through factoring. It's an ugly decimal. And then my second answer here, I would have a negative 12 take away 8.25. Divide that by 2, and we get x equals negative 10.125. Those would be your two answers of where it is going to cross the x-axis at. So let's go ahead and look at one more example. Example 2, I personally would always ask myself, can I factor this first? So let's think of our factors of negative 8. And we would have 1 and 8, negative 1 and a positive 8, and a positive 1 and a negative 8. We also can have our 2 and our 4. So actually, I can tell you right now that our factors and where it's going to cross, if we were to set these equal to 0 and go through the solving process, here would be what factors would work to give me a negative 2x. But I want to show you that the quadratic formula will also work. Okay, so let's still go ahead. Let's put in our a, which is going to be 1. Remember this, we need to make this plus a negative. This is going to be b, and plus a negative, that will be c. So let's go ahead and plug it in the quadratic formula and show you that we'll get the same thing. So we're going to have x equals negative and then b, which is a negative. Always put that negative and then b in parentheses, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4, a is 1, and c is negative 8, divided by 2 and a, which is positive 1. So as we begin to simplify here, I can tell you that I see x equals a negative negative is just going to be a positive 2, plus or minus the square root, negative 2 squared, that's negative 2 times negative 2, which is positive 4. And a negative, this you can look at this as a negative 4. Remember, plus a negative? So a negative 4 times 1 times negative 8 is going to be a plus 32, divided by my whole number 2. So as we continue to simplify, I'm going to have x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 36 divided by 2. Well, we know that square root of 36 is just 6. So we're going to have two different answers here. We're going to have x is 2 plus 6 divided by 2, and x is 2 minus 6 divided by 2. So we get 8 over 2, which is 4. That's going to be one of our answers. And 2 minus 6 is going to be a negative 4 over 2. So we have a negative 2 as our second answer. So these are our final answers. This is where our quadratic, our parabola, will cross the x-axis at a positive 4 and a negative 2. And if we were to finish with our factors and go through our grouping method and set it equal to 0 and solve, we would have gotten the same answers. So showing you that you can use the quadratic formula anytime, as well as if you like factoring, sometimes the factors will work, but like the first example, they won't always. That's it. Practice in that quadratic formula.